In this screencast, we're going to go over how to use the Populate feature in the coding form with an event button. Before doing any of the following, make sure you're in design mode on the coding form, which we are now. I'll single click on this number 15 Samson event button and then just click the I to open up the inspector here. Now we can see some of the properties for this event. And you can see by default the Populate checkbox is unchecked. So let's take a look at how this event behaves in code mode with Populate unchecked. Go to code mode and the movie starts playing right away. We'll pretend that number 15 has the ball, so I'll single click to mark the beginning of an instance here. And you can see when I do that, a row gets added to the timeline right away. So as soon as you mark in, the row gets added. Now I'll let this progress to the end of the possession, hit the space bar to pause, and then single click on the button again to mark out or mark the end of the possession. So you can see, let me go back to design mode, you can see that with Populate unchecked, the point is the row doesn't get added until you mark in with the event. The advantage of using Populate or checking those boxes is that you can choose how the rows appear in your timeline every time. So for example, if I always want my offense and defense rows to show up in the timeline at the top, I can populate those. So let's try this again from the start. Let me just bring this back to the point we started from. I'll select this row and just press delete, so it's like we're picking up from the same point that we started at earlier. But this time I'm going to populate offense, and you can see it adds the row right away. Then I'll choose defense and populate that. Now those rows will always appear at the top of my timeline no matter which player events I click on after that. So now let's do the same thing. I'll flip to code mode. Here's number 15. You can see since he's unpopulated, his event gets added below those two rows that were already populated, and the instance drops into the row, and I can end it there. It's also worth noting that the rows populate themselves into the timeline in the order that you actually populate the event buttons. So for example, let me go back to design mode here, and I'm just going to select this row that we just coded and just press delete to get rid of it. For example, if I wanted the player rows in the timeline to show up in the specific order that the events show up in the coding form, then I would populate them in that order. So let me click here and open up the inspector on number 3. I would populate that one first, and you can see Jones' row drops into the timeline there. If I wanted number 10 to show up next, I would populate that one next. But let's say I wanted number 24 to show up before 15. I would be sure to check that before checking number 15. So I hope that helps and it gives you a good idea of some of the advantages that you can get from using Populate. Remember that it can be helpful to work out your coding form and events on paper first before starting to build the coding form. Thanks for watching.